And one, we are live. Hi, Tarek. Welcome to Jyoti Marketing Podcast, and it's all about talk about marketing. And certainly, we will be talking about marketing, but majorly about your career. And I would like you to explain to the audience like what you are doing exactly. Why do you think that you are going to be famous soon, and what are the specific things that you're doing? So, a small intro would be really helpful for our audience.
Yeah, small intro. I've always been difficult with sort of a small intros. I usually end up rambling on. But yeah, so I'm right now. I'm a university student. I'm in my final year doing my undergrad in England at the University of Reading, studying history and international relations. But my aspirations are to go into presenting. So I have the sort of ongoing joke. I think I know where you picked it up from on my LinkedIn. It says, "Follow me before I get famous."
Yes,
Um, uh,
that's why I asked.
yeah, a lot of people do pick up on that. Yeah, so like the whole thing is the fact that I do want to go into TV presenting one day. I
Hmm.
do some radio presenting for B Radio, so I'm a host of a radio show. I also do some freelance presenting. I've worked with a few little startups here and there, doing some social media presenting, social media interviewing, and yeah, I'm just doing sort of some presenting for myself as well, and just growing my brand as a presenter, making sure that I'm networking and getting into the right spaces. Hopefully on Wednesday I'll be doing some stuff with the Champions League for Arsenal versus Sevilla. So
Oh,
very
oh,
exciting stuff. Yeah.
congratulations for that, no?
Yeah, that should be quite fun at the Emirates Stadium, which should be good. A few weeks ago, I did Arsenal versus City. I'm doing the UCI Track Champions League, so really exciting stuff. And then also at the same time, trying to do my university degree and build my sort of social media presence as well. So very very busy.
Okay, seems like a lot of work, but these are the results of the thing that you do at your background, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you are a university student, and of course, majorly of people who follow you knows about it, right? That you are a
Mm.
university student. How, as a university student, one can actually network with such giants, network with other people to grab on opportunities. Why I'm asking that? Because if I talk about normal networking, the normal things that come into my mind, like let's DM someone on LinkedIn or do something like that. But what are your specific strategy that you, after so many years of working, you feel like this is something my key? So what's
Mm.
that?
I think listen, LinkedIn is an incredible tool, right?
Yeah.
And I think but the issue is that everyone seems to roughly do the sort of same thing when it comes to LinkedIn. They'll send a very generic message to a lot of people hoping that someone will respond. I think the one of the things that I really pride myself on is making sure that anything that I do is really personalized. So if I am messaging on someone on LinkedIn, I'm sending a really personalized invite. I'm looking through their profile, seeing things that they've done in the past, seeing maybe social media content that they've created in the past, and going, look, I've saw this, like, I really enjoyed it, blah blah blah. I'd really love your help on X, Y, and Z. Really being clear on why I've specifically messaged that person, and you're like a million times more likely to get a response if you've got something personalized. And I think in terms of in-person networking, which is where I think I thrive, I think the key is
Oh.
when you go to networking events is to really try and get to know people. A lot of people go to
Mhm.
networking events trying to get something, whether
Yeah.
that's a job or an opportunity or whether a connection. But my thing has always been, I want to go into this networking event and get to know as many people as possible and find out more about them. What do they do? What do they enjoy doing in their free time? What's their future aspirations? And what, if they can help me along the way, great. If not, no worries, right? But at least I built up my network. Whereas other people sort of go in there looking for something and it becomes obvious, right? Like, I've met people at networking events who are quite prominent people, and they'll say to me, "Oh, Tara, I actually really like talking to you, because when I'm talking to you, I feel like you're not trying to get something out of me." And again, that's it's what I pride myself on. It's like I just want to have a genuine conversation, whereas a lot of other people will be speaking to these people trying to get an
Yeah.
opportunity. So I'd say my
Yeah.
advice is when you're on at these networking opportunities, like speak to these people like they're just, your casual friends. Introduce yourself. Don't be afraid to sort of join in conversations. Especially if a conversation has already started between a group, just join in. Just
Yeah.
be like, oh look, I saw this group here. I was like, oh, I just wanted to see what you guys are talking about. Have the confidence to just step into a conversation like you would if you saw your mates, and
Yeah.
just sort of find out about other people, ask questions about them, ask them about what they do. Oftentimes, I'll very rarely talk about myself at a networking event. A lot of the time, people,
That's
oh,
what I want to know, Tarek, because
yeah,
majority of people go to networking event with some agenda, right?
mm,
And you also have agenda when you go to networking events. It is first of all to get connected with some big giants, some big people who are at certain level. But at like the whole agenda at the end of the day is that you get something, you get a job or you get any opportunity from them. At the end, that's the agenda. And at the same time, you mentioned try to be genuine, like talk or communicate as if just for the friendship purpose or just for the networking purpose with no gains, right? That is the point. Like, are there any specific things that you think like one should talk about while making a genuine connection by going to networking events? And I'm going to come to the LinkedIn networking as well, but since we're talking about offline networking, so any key points about that?
I think one of the first things what I like to do is I like to always start the conversation off with a compliment, right? So, like, I will mention something about their hair or their shoes or their beard or their outfit or something because that instantly makes you more memorable, right? Because you're complimenting them and they're like, oh, and their guard goes down because they're like, oh, who's this guy who's just randomly complimented my shoes? And I'll say, I'm quite confident. Other people might not be as confident to do it. And it takes experience. You do it more and more, and eventually it becomes easy for you to do, right? If you're not used to
Right.
complimenting people a lot, it's quite difficult initially. But like I'll be like, oh, I might be like, Jyoti, I love your blazer, by the way, and I saw your blazer, and I was like, I want to speak to that girl because she's got a cool blazer, and
Yeah.
they'll immediately start laughing and they'll be open to conversation and they'll be like, oh well, thank you very much, and then I'll be like, oh, so what do you do or what's your name, and then they'll tell me their name, and then we'll just get to like talking like very very casual how you talk to your friend, all right, and I think that's what makes you memorable is if you start off with
Got
a
it.
compliment. And what you can also
Okay.
do is if you
Hmm.
start off with a compliment, is when you message them later on or you email them because you get their email, you get their Instagram, or you get their LinkedIn. When you start the message, you go, "Hi, Jyoti. I'm the guy who really loved your blazer at the event. I hope you're well. Thank you very much for talking to me. Here's my network." Like the real networking is actually done in those DMs afterwards. The initial bit is building that relationship, and so really,
Yeah.
you don't really want to be talking about what you do or what opportunities that you want. You want to be talking about that in the DM. In this bit, in the face-to-face interaction, you just want to be building a connection. You want to build a relationship because that's more natural, right? You're talking to them as if they're your friend. You're trying to get to know them like you would when you meet someone for the first time. Afterwards, in that DM or in those emails, you're then trying to get the job, or you're trying to hear
Yeah,
about opportunities or
opportunity or
whatever.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, got it. So, and do you term yourself as an introvert or an extrovert? Like, I'll guess you are an extrovert, but were you an introvert earlier or something like that? Because that's the major problem among
Mm.
youngsters. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was introverted when I was, a lot young. Like, I mean, I'm still quite young, so when I was a lot younger, I was very much introverted. And then when I sort of went into secondary school, when I was about, 12, 13, I just became, very extroverted. And then obviously
Okay.
now I want to be a presenter, so I sort of have to be extroverted. But I love people. I see a room full of people that I don't know, and I get excited. I'm like, oh yeah, I get to speak to loads of different
Amazing.
people,
Yeah.
right? That's
That's
just
the quality of
how
an
I've always been.
extrovert. They do not fear the room full of people. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that my advice to like people who are sort of more fearful, or who are more introverted is you've just got to start it, one person at a time, right? And if you are
That's true.
really introverted, like I've got friends who are really shy, and
Hmm.
I always say the best way to start is by just talking to like the shop assistant or the assistant at the supermarket or whatever. You're never going to see this person again, right?
Hmm.
And just honestly start off with complimenting them or saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, saying
This
how are
is such
you,
a
how's your
nice
day.
point. Like you
Yeah.
can actually perceive the other person as a shop assistant, and because the point is that the introvert actually fears to not speak up in front of other people or like do networking is because of fear of judgment.
Mm.
And if we perceive the other person as like assistant in a shop or something, we know they are not going to judge. We are here for some work, right? And they
Yeah.
are not going to judge. And that perspective changes the whole scene. And
Mm.
probably you can take your first step as an introvert. Such an amazing point, Tarek. You also mentioned, okay, if in this world now everything is online, do you still prefer to go to offline networking, or just like I can just sit at my home and do networking and make good connection like you and me connected, like very far but still like on the same screen, now we know each other. So what do you think, like a person can sit online and then do network, or is it important to go offline?
I think you can definitely do it, right? Like you can definitely do it. Like, I'm lucky because I live in Reading, which is fairly close to London, and so there's networking opportunities that happen in London a
Hmm.
lot,
Yeah.
especially for young people. But
Yeah.
if you're from where I'm from, which is my parents are from sort of living my family live in up north in Lancashire, where there aren't as many opportunities. You can do it online. Generally I really started networking during the pandemic, where I was just sort of messaging people. I had my own podcast, the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. I haven't uploaded a podcast episode in over a year because I've been so busy. But, I was, regularly uploading episodes by just sort of messaging people and going, hi, you seem like you're really interesting. I'd love to have you on my podcast. Would you be interested? And then most of the time people would say no, but sometimes people would say yes, and we'd record a podcast over like Zoom or something.
Okay.
And so like you can definitely do it online. It's definitely possible, especially through things like LinkedIn, and just ask to hop on a call with someone or build a
Yes.
relationship with through DMs, because there are a lot of people who I am, building a relationship through with DMs who, if I ask them, can I hop on a call with you? They'll just say that they're busy, right? But if I build a
Yes.
relationship with them and, message them on Instagram, comment on their Instagram, comment on their LinkedIn posts, I become a feature in their social media lives constantly, right?
Don't you
And
think
then
like people nowadays perceive this as like, of course, this is one way of showing yourself or putting yourself in front of their eyes again and again so that they
mm,
remember you. But don't you think some people currently in this scenario term this as like, I would say, very forceful or something, or do we just keep that perspective away and not follow it?
it's only forceful if you're constantly trying to get something out of them, right?
Hmm.
But it's not if you're think about it. Everyone loves comments on their Instagram posts. Everyone
Yes.
loves people telling them that they're doing well. Everyone loves comments on their that replies to their stories, or comments on their LinkedIn, or likes on their LinkedIn, right? Those things, you're not
Hmm.
getting anything. You're personally not getting anything. They're getting something. They're getting a like or a comment or whatever. And if they don't like it, they can block you, right? And then you just go, right, fine. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was meant to be, or they can mute you or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
well, actually 10 times out of 10, I've never had a bad instance where someone's gone, oh, do you know what? This guy's a weirdo. I don't know why he keeps commenting on my posts, right?
So
People love comments,
what
right?
was, who was that person who you were trying to reach and it actually happened and it landed you an amazing opportunity? Can we know the story, please?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few, but one of the sort of big ones was, Amelia Sardell at Clout. So I was on placement year last year, which, I mean, if you don't know, it's basically in between your bachelor's or your undergrad, you do a year in industry. So you do 2 years at university, 1 year working,
Yeah.
and then 1 year back
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
university.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
know.
I
Yeah.
was, I was about to start actually no, so I identified Amelia Sardell as a potential podcast guest, but my tactic to getting Amelia on, because she was very, she had over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, like she was quite big. I was thinking she's not going to want to come on a little podcast. So I was like, I need to give her something in order for her to feel like, oh, do you know what? I'll come on his podcast. So
Yeah.
I was
Absolutely.
for maybe 2 months constantly, commenting on all her posts. I'd have a notification on her posts. I would reply to her stories on Instagram because she had less followers on Instagram. So there was less people there messaging her on Instagram. She only had like 3,000 at the time compared to 100,000 on LinkedIn. I would, comment on her posts, etc., etc. And I do that quite relentlessly. Like not every single post, but a lot of posts, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually I was like, you know what, I'm gonna, go in for the kill, and I'm gonna ask her to come on my podcast. I asked her to come on the podcast. She agreed. She was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, and what the advantage was the minute that she came on the Zoom call, it felt like we already knew each other because we'd spoken so much on Instagram DMs. And then at the end of that podcast episode, so not only did we make a good podcast episode, which is one of the results that came out of, those messages before, but she offered me a job. And she said, at the end of the episode, she was like, what are you doing now, Tarek? I was like, oh, I'm going on placement year with this other company. And she said, oh, well, instead of going on a placement year with that company, why don't you come and work for me for a year?
Yeah.
And initially I turned it down. Then I accepted it a few months later. And like a job came out of it. So those DMs, those comments, those replies that a lot of people on LinkedIn know, I got that through, messaging and commenting and being really
Amazing,
persistent. And that's just
amazing.
one of the
I guess
connections I've built.
that's the effort. That's the effort behind it, right?
Mm,
And the intention. I guess so.
exactly.
The intention matters. So you had an intention to invite her to the podcast, and with your positive intention and with your positive vibe, as I guess. So she might have offered you, and she must have saw something different in you because
Mm.
like yeah. So when I texted you on LinkedIn, like what do you like, why do you think like you agreed to this and talk about your networking thing and all? Like of
Um,
course like you must be getting some messages in again for the podcast, but what made my message different?
um, you know what? I think the thing is, I think there's a lot of like yeah, I'm I don't want to be too egotistical, but I do think there's a lot of rubbish when it comes to things like networking, and especially for young people. And like people are just told, yeah, go to networking events. Like people are
Yeah,
told, especially with sort of in this country, in the UK, right?
yeah.
Everyone's encouraged to go to university, which is ridiculous because there's no need. Most people probably shouldn't, including myself, probably shouldn't even go to university because they're not passionate about academia, but they're basically pushed to go to university because everyone's told from a young age that this is the only option, that you
Yeah,
have to get an undergrad, even though that shouldn't be the case. So everyone's told to go down this route. Everyone goes through this linear, sort of educational sort of process, and then they get, they finish, or maybe in their final year of university, they go, oh no, like I've got to start working next year. What do I do? And a lot of people have never worked before, or they've never worked a
yeah,
full-time job before, or they've maybe worked here and there. They don't have the sort of skill because school hasn't taught them the necessary skills to thrive in a working environment or to get a job. Job applications are stupidly competitive now. They make no
yeah.
sense most of the time. So many students don't have experience. And
True.
so, and people, people will be like, oh yeah, go to networking events. Go to networking events and do networking isn't normal, right? And I've said this earlier. It's not a normal thing to try and it's quite it makes me a bit like icky networking because you're trying to squeeze an opportunity out of someone, right? And that
True. True.
you
Yeah.
shouldn't be going to networking events for that, right? And I think the information out there, one, isn't relevant anymore about what you should do to get, to secure yourself a job, and two, it's not really helpful information. Like go to a networking event, all right, and do what, right? Whereas like I feel like I can, with my experience, sort of over the last sort of, I mean, I'm still young, right? But I feel like over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I've always been quite proactive when it comes to my career and trying to figure out what I want to do. I've gone to networking events, I've done assessment centers, I've had loads and loads of work. I've worked since I was 15. Like, so I've always been sort of quite proactive with it. I think the information that I have can really benefit young people because I am a young person compared to,
Yeah.
a 35-year-old or a 30-year-old or even like a
Yeah.
25-year-old. The world has changed so much over the last few years. Like it's hard for a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old to give that advice to young people because in that space of time we've had COVID, we've had online networking, you know jobs are becoming way more competitive. I feel like I can provide a little bit more of a relevant sort of advice, if you will.
Absolutely, absolutely right. So, Tarek, you are currently in college, but
Mm.
after your college gets done, so you are currently working with companies, you are currently working with radio, and I can imagine there will be something really huge when you'll be done with your college and you'll be doing something really huge. So, what that huge includes for you?
Well, it has to be something that will get me into a position where I'm a presenter full time, right? Like when I realized I wanted to be a presenter, which was during the
Yeah.
first year of my university degree, during COVID, we were stuck in lockdown. I couldn't do everything was online. Seminars, lectures were online. I was really disappointed because I'm an extrovert. I wanted to meet as many people as possible, and I couldn't do it. Started a podcast, loved interviewing people, did some presenting for myself on social media, did some radio presenting, and went, you know what, this was for me. And so anything that I do has to get me closer to becoming a full-time presenter, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't really care about how much money I'm making. As long as I can make enough to like survive, I don't really care about making as much money as possible. I can make, again, not trying to be too egotistical, but I could get a job, and I've been offered jobs where I could make pretty good money for my age in a grad scheme at a big company.
Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
but it's not aligned to what I want to do. Like, it's not anything to do with presenting. Like, it might be to do with marketing, like global marketing, or sort of more, sort of central marketing, I guess, if you want to call it.
Yes.
And like for
Mhm.
me, that's not going to get me to where I want to get to, right? Like, I had the opportunity to work for a big FMCG for a whole year. I turned that down to join a startup instead, to do more social media content creation, to hone my skills as a presenter. So for me, it's going to be about finding a role where I feel like I can develop skills in order to eventually be a presenter. Because to be a presenter, you don't just become a presenter like that. It's a,
That's
eight,
true.
10, like most presenters are usually around 30 years old. So in my head, I've got around 8 years or so to basically make it as a proper full-time presenter. So every decision I make has to be, is this going to help me become a presenter? So
Aligned to your
that's
goal,
my,
right?
exactly,
Hmm.
yeah. So that's my next step, is trying to find what opportunity will allow me to become a presenter and going for it.
Correct. Got it. And Tarek, I would say, shall I call you lucky enough to find your purpose while doing your studies, or shall I call you hardworking enough to find your purpose? What
Uh,
should I tell, like, title you
Yeah,
about
I mean,
that?
I think it's, a bit of both, to be honest. I think hardworking is always a weird sort of term to ascribe to, because there are a lot of people who work hard, right? A lot of people work hard. There are a lot of people who work hard and get nothing for it. There are a lot of people who work hard all around the world, and they earn pennies because of the horrible situation that they're in. So I wouldn't call myself hardworking, or because there are people who work a million times harder than me, but because they were born in the right country or whatever, or they were dealt a hard hand in life, they'll never get the opportunity that I get, right? Um, but what I would say is, I am proactive, and I realized in my first year of university, when I stood, sat in a university bedroom during lockdown, was, I didn't want to just sort of sit there and feel sorry for myself. I did for a bit. I was quite a little bit depressed, but then I was like, you know what, no, I'm going to do something about it. And that's when I
Yeah.
realized, I don't want to go down the civil service. I don't want to go into politics, which is what I'm studying, and instead I want to go, into presenting and into social media content
Presented.
creation. And that came
Yeah.
out of being proactive. There's an incredible amount of luck. A lot of people don't like talking about it. Everyone loves talking about how hard they worked, how proactive they were, how it was all of
Yeah.
them. I think there's an incredible amount of luck, from the fact that I went to the University of Reading, from the fact that I was born in this country, to the fact that I had the resources to start a podcast. Having access to Zoom, and I knew what Zoom was, and I had all this access.
That's so,
And I became
I
this
would say
whole,
that's so transparent of you, Tarek. That's so
yeah.
transparent of you because I have talked to a lot of people and I still do. I get in touch with a lot of other people who are really famous. And one thing that I understood from them, that they do hard work, they do smart work. But you mentioned one very specific point, that everyone conditions are different, right? They must be born in some other place where there are more opportunities as compared to the one who is more intelligent but with less opportunities.
Mm.
So based on that, either you become like hyper productive or hyper hardworking person, or maybe you already have the opportunity, you just have to tap into it. But people who do not have any opportunities, we know such success stories around the world as well. People with zero opportunities, they create opportunities from them for themselves, and then become the one or reach towards the goal where they want to be. Like for example, you want to be presenter. So on that same point, I would say a youth who is in college or school, I would not include school, but in the college and universities, they're actually really confused basically what they want to do. Because see, I also like coach about marketing to the students who are in college, so that they can make their career in marketing instead of just going to theories but more into practical science. But majority of inquiries that even I get or other coaches or my clients get is, students are confused, they just want to try, or maybe they will see, okay, if this works or not, which is a good way. But by the end of their university, they're still confused, and then they land a job, a 9 to 5 job, in which they feel like really shitty, and then they doubt their whole life, their whole decisions. And that's why I'm asking you, like, what do you think, what suggestion you would like to give your people? Because your age people, you have your friends also, and I'm not sure if all of your friends are on the similar path of growth or are still confused. So what advice you would like to give them from your
I mean,
experience?
yeah, I mean, I think most people are. So, like, again, you mentioned it. I do consider myself extremely lucky to be in a position where I know what I want to do. I
Yeah.
99% of, I was 19 when I sort of figured out I wanted to be a presenter. And I might get to 25 and be like, I don't want to do this. And I might be in the same boat as most 25-year-olds, most 19-year-olds,
Hmm.
most 30, 40, 50-year-olds these days, right? They don't know what they want to do. And I think what's important to and it's weird coming from someone who is in that position of privilege. But I've spoken to people who are like 70 years old. I've interviewed, someone who was 70, I think he was 78 years old. He was a pirate negotiator for a living. And I asked him, sort of what advice would you give if you speak to your 19-year-old self? And he basically said something along the lines of, don't worry about not knowing what you want to do. All right. Don't worry about, just figure, you'll figure it out. Right. Like humans are made to be able to adapt and evolve. All right. You'll figure out what you want to do. As long as you're proactive and you're willing to try new things and do different things, then you will find the thing that you want to do. And you know what? You might not end up finding what the long term goal is, but you might stumble upon a job that you really enjoy, maybe for a year, maybe for 2 years, and maybe for 10 years, you might end up staying at that job or that company because you really sort of you end up stumbling upon it and you really enjoy it, right? But it's about being proactive. Like I know a lot of people who struggle to find a job at university, and sorry, after university, they ended up getting into a job where there was no development. It was okay pay, but there was no development. They couldn't climb any sort of company ladder. There was no skills development, and they stuck there for a year or two. And I told them constantly, I said, go to another company, work in a supermarket, work in a bigger company where you can climb up a ladder, where you can develop skills, so that way, and
Yeah.
then you can apply for other jobs. And I told this person, specifically go into a supermarket. After about a year, he finally listened to me and went into a supermarket. Did it work at a supermarket for about a year and a half. And now finally, with that experience, with those skills that he's learned at a supermarket, he got a promotion. He ended up then getting a job closer to his field that he studied at university. And that's because he was proactive. He was changing. Eventually, after a few
Yeah.
years,
Right.
after he finished his degree, he was like, right, and listen to me. And when I told him, try new things and carry on applying for jobs, he ended up going for something. And now, after I think 2 years or maybe even 2.5 years, he's finally in an area that's sort of closely aligned to his university degree. But before, if he wasn't proactive and he was just like, oh well, I can't find a job that's in this industry, I'm just gonna just give up. I'm just gonna work in this, whatever for a little bit, and then I'm just gonna work in this petrol station for a little bit or the supermarket for a little bit, and then that's it. But he's being proactive. He's applying for more and more jobs. Carry on
Yeah.
applying, try new things. And if you don't like it, it's okay to just be like, you know what, this job isn't for me. I'm gonna go do something else instead. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
backwards. Sometimes you gotta go backwards to go forward. So I think it's just about being proactive, trying new things, trying different things, and hoping for the best. To be fair.
Would you agree the mindset plays the major core role in everything? Because people who go abroad or people who are in the universities, they think like working in a supermarket is the one way of making money and then paying their home rent or house rent or something. And there's other way as well if you look at your mindset. If you change or tweak your mindset, that is where the whole things, everything makes a difference, right? You agree to
No,
that point?
100%. Like I said, being proactive is a mindset thing, and it's hard to be
Yeah.
proactive, especially when you're
Hmm.
struggling with job applications. Listen, I've been there, like especially when I was applying for placements. Right, I applied for. I was spending 5, 6, 7 hours every single week, alongside a university degree, alongside working multiple part-time jobs. At the end of the day, I was absolutely shattered, and I was applying, and most companies wouldn't like even. Like these days, most companies don't even tell you that they've rejected you, right? They won't even bother.
Yeah.
They don't have time, apparently. Forget giving you feedback. They won't even tell you that you've been rejected. So it's a disheartening process, but you just got to carry on pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually you'll get something. And the ironic thing is I eventually did get something, and I realized I didn't like it, and then I ended up using, what I said earlier. I ended up messaging the person that offered me a job and ended up going to their company instead. And so you will get to a point where one, you work really hard for jobs or applications or whatever, and you won't hear back, and it'll be disheartening. You need to push through. Then you'll push through, and you'll get something, and then you'll do that job for a month or two, and you realize, I don't even want to do this. I want to do something else. Then you try something else, and it's all about just sort of trying and being able to like mentally realize that you don't need to get to a point where you've got it all figured out. I think because again, the linear system of school, everyone feels like they have to figure it out. They have to, because school is very much, you go from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, year 4. Everything is laid out to you, your homework, your lesson plans, everything. And then all of a sudden you're stuck into the real world, you're pushed into the real world, and it's not laid out for you. You don't know what your next step is. But you need to realize that's completely okay, and that's part of life is figuring it out. And like I said, I've met 78-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds,
Yeah.
30-year-olds, who
Absolutely.
have no idea what they
Yeah.
want to do. They're still figuring it
Yeah.
out. They're gonna have a million different jobs, and that's okay. And that's the beauty of life. The amount of people that you're gonna be able to meet, because of the fact that these days we don't have to just stick to the same job. 40, 50 years ago, people had one or two, three jobs in their whole life. They'd start working at 18 and they stay at that job until they were 70. Like, that's mental.
Yeah.
They only
And
met a handful of people. These now you can I think I remember reading somewhere that most people in this generation are going to have up to 15 jobs in their lifetime. So 15 jobs, if you're working for 60 years, right? What's that? 15, 30, 45. That's like a new job every 4 years or so. Like,
yeah.
if and probably more than that, probably 20, 25, before you know it, jobs everything. I know people that's change jobs every sort of 2 years or so. And that's exciting. You're meeting new people, new challenges, new industries, new skills. Like, you just need to embrace that and accept that it's okay to not know what
That's
you want to
true.
do.
That's true. I would just add on a last point to it, but it's kind of a really highly valuable things that you're actually putting out. First is the mindset matters, right? And second thing that I learned and actually agree 100% is that opportunities is something. Maybe you are born at certain place and you get more opportunity. It is just about the mindset. Then it's like taking that effort as you like convince your friend and it happened, it is working for him, right?
Mm.
How do you like, this is the very last thing, along with the content creation, alongside that there must be certain failures that you must be facing as a college student, as a person who has tried and worked with different jobs, working with different jobs, etc., and is at a different path. How do you deal with failure and isolation? Basically, how do you deal with that personally?
Um, Oh, that's a tough question, to be fair. How do you deal with fail? Well, yeah, like I said, I mean, sort of, I've had my failures. I think that the big thing is you've got to embrace it, right? And I think a lot of people are. It's a very cliche of saying, oh, embrace your failures, right? But the way I see it is, failure is going to happen regardless. It doesn't matter how hard I work, right? I'm gonna fail. There's gonna be applications that I send out, things that I do that just don't work. That's going to happen regardless. So there's no point being scared of it. I'm just like, you know what? It's going to happen. I'm excited for it. I embrace it. Like, I can't,
You're not
I've
scared of
always said,
failure.
no, I
You're
mean,
not
I
scared
think
of
we are.
failure.
I think everyone is like that. Again, that's another thing that I hate. I hate when people go, I'm not scared of failure, right? As if, like, in an ideal world, you wouldn't fail, right? You succeed in everything that you do and you're great and brilliant and everything's perfect. But I think everyone doesn't want to fail, but you've got to accept that failure is going to happen. And that's okay, right? And there's advantages to failing because you're going to develop and you're going to learn new things. And because I accept that failure is inevitably going to happen, I just go, yeah, it's going to happen, and it's going to be frustrating, and I'm going to get annoyed, and I'm going to be upset when it happens, but it's going to happen, and I accept it well in advance. I go, listen, I'm trying to be a presenter, there's going to be so many hurdles for me to get there, but eventually I'm going to get there. I just need to pass those failures, and every failure that happens is one step closer to getting to where I want to get to, right? And I think that's the sort of, and it's a hard mindset to have, especially when you're in a position where you're struggling for a job or you're figuring out what you want to do. Is, man, like, I can't. It's just constant failure after failure after failure. Like I said, when I was applying for internships, constant failure after failure after failure after failure. But you just got to carry on pushing and carry on going. And I think just being like, you know what, it's gonna happen. But every time I fail, I'm one step closer to where I want to get to, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. If someone is saying, and this is a very common quote, embrace failures, and I agree to it. I personally agree to it. Yes, for a few days you'll feel like shit. You'll feel like you are nothing. You are zero. But after a few days, you will realize that what you do not have to do, except like what you have to do. Now you're going to focus more on that, and you're going to become
Mhm.
1% better, then 2% better, and then the perfect person to get that opportunity and become better and complete your goals, fulfill your goals. Like that's how the life works. Yeah, like you would agree to that. Okay.
Exactly.
A very very last important question as we talk about networking, but this agenda of this is to talk about content as well. Do you think like you are active on LinkedIn? Do you think like content creation? If I'm not, for example, if I'm a normal person, I'm an engineer. Do you think I should be really active on LinkedIn or content creation as well because of how the things are working in the market currently? I am something like not related to content.
Mm.
What you would suggest?
I think everyone should be creating content. Like, I'm genuine believing that, because I think, I believe that everyone has something to say and everyone has something valuable to say. And that value is obviously dependent on who sort of says it. And so you can provide that value through content. And yes, it's cringe, and yes, you're going to be thinking, well, who cares about my opinion? But it's the truth. but there are going to be people who are interested in what you think and what you say and what you do, right? Like, I, post sort of, I try and be sort of weird and funny and sort of
Yeah.
different on LinkedIn. I'll post videos of me eating and stuff, eating donuts and
Yes,
talk and
I saw
reviewing donuts,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And like people love that stuff. Like I get like 30, 40 people in my comments being like, oh, this was so funny, like this was different on the feed and blah blah blah. And I'll get opportunities off the back of that because other people are seeing this and they go, this guy's, really proactive. And I think what content creation does, regardless of what industry you're in, is it shows a side of your personality that you can't show in an application, that is you can't show in a job interview because those are so formal. But in content creation you can be yourself. And the key thing here to remember, I think, for young people and older people, is the job market and opportunities out there is all competitive, but people are now looking for, because there's loads of people who can do the job, but people are looking for people who are going to be fun and interesting to work with. Like, who's someone that they can get along with in an office, or who's someone that they can get along with over an online call, who's someone that they can rely on to get the job done. That's what they're looking
And
for. There's a
maybe who
million
was
people that
thinking
can do
out
the
of the
job.
box, not the
Yeah,
usual one.
exactly. Who's someone who's proactive? Well, guess what? That's what content creation does. Content creation shows, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It shows that you're willing to start something, that you're proactive, that you're willing to learn
Yes.
new skills. It shows a different side of your personality. There's only advantages. Obviously, there's certain industries where you can't create content because of the job that you're in, right? Engineering
Hmm.
isn't one of those industries. You can definitely create content. But let's say, for example, if you work in finance, you can't give out finance advice because there's legal aspects of it and blah, 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 blah. Or
Maybe you can
but
just talk about your occupation, everything, or
exactly,
maybe the learnings. But the content, as you well said, like there's no harm in creating content, even if
exactly.
you are at any job.
Yeah. And
Absolutely
yes,
agree with that. Hmm.
100% it's going to be cringe and your friends are probably going to laugh at you, and that's fine.
Yeah,
I used to get laughed at all the time. Uh, it's great, but you just embrace it. Like, people laugh at you and then you just go, yeah, that's funny, that's funny. And like inside it's a bit annoying, but you don't let them know that it's sort of annoying and it cringes you out as well. And then eventually you'll get an opportunity here and there, and then those exact same people will pop up on your Instagram and be like, oh my god, this is so cool, like, how did you end up doing this? And it's because you were proactive, because you started creating
that's
content, because
true.
you developed
Even
skills.
I got my first job. Like currently, I run my business, but when I started my career, even I got my first job because I was posting consistently about free resources, how to learn digital marketing. Like whatever I used to learn, I used to make a creative on Canva and post it on Instagram.
Mm.
And then one company reached out to me. They were like, "Are you creating this for your whole page and etc.?" I said, "Yeah." Okay, would you mind working as a social media executive? And that's how my full time job started, and that's
There
how I
you go.
became. Exactly,
See,
exactly.
and that's
And
through content creation. And like, I guarantee, if you looked at those posts now, you like think these are awful. Like, what is this? This is not
yeah,
good. Like, this does
they're
not look good.
awful,
But
but
because you
yeah,
started and you showed proactiveness, that's what companies care about. They go, you know what,
that's
this
true.
girl's like doing something different. She's being proactive. She seems really cool, like, etc., etc. That's what people are
That's
interested in.
true. That's true. And there are like different perspectives. There are different ideas as well. Like I would say, if you are truly loving your job, you will never go out of the content ideas as well because there's something new that is happening to your life, your career, your business, your job,
Mm,
your college, everything, right? And you just take one topic, write about it, write it in a creative manner. That's it. There you go. One day, someone who has to notice it will notice it and will give you the opportunity. Here
exactly.
the game. That's how it works. Tarek, it was amazing talking to you. And I actually host people who run businesses in marketing, but I was so intrigued by your purpose, like the way you see life when we had a first call. So the way you are in college, you are doing something amazing, and you left one job. You got one job in one MNC, right? And then this lady who came up on podcast with you landed you another job. And I would say I'm not going to title this as lucky. I'm going to title as proactive mind, as you mentioned, amazing mindset, and a different way of looking at life. Because students at a age really need to learn how to do market, how to do networking, and how to be a part of content creation.
Mm,
And the agenda of this podcast was only to tell them how and why. And I guess so we talked a lot about it, and I'm really sure this is going to help a lot of people. And I definitely wish like this podcast reaches to every right audience that who is confused how to network and make connection and start working. Because for one job 10,000 plus people are applying, and you are praying day in day out that I might get the job, I should get this job. how you have to stand out, you have to network, and that's how you're going to grow in 2024 is there, 2024 is
Mm,
there, and that's how it is going to work. Applying for a normal job, this is not how it's going to work. Now, Tariq, I can actually see a brightest future of you, because I know you have worked multiple places. You have amazing experience, immense experience. So anyone can talk to you, and without looking at your CV, they can land you the job. They can give you the job,
mm.
right? And that was your agenda, I guess. So maybe you haven't planned it, but that's how it finally came up, apps, right?
Yeah,
And
no,
that's,
100%.
yeah,
I think there was an. I
amazing.
will always say there was an element of luck as well to like everything. I don't want to be those people. I'm sure I know I'm going to be successful one day, right? But I don't want to be those people who become successful and they're like, yeah, it's because I worked hard. It goes back to what I said earlier about like it's all situational. There's someone out there who's working a million times harder than there's many people out there who's working a million times harder than me, but because of the privilege, they don't have the privileges that I have. They're not going to get to where I want to get to or where I'm going to get to, right? And I think that's always important to acknowledge, and that humbles you and it encourages you to try and help as many people as possible.
That's true. That's true. Amazing, Tarek. Thank you so much for being here. I knew your schedule was really hectic because you have to work on a lot of things, college
Mm.
assignments, etc. But thank you very much. I'm really grateful to talk to you about each and everything, and I really hope this comes up as the helpful content for a right audience, a target audience. Thank you so much, Tarek. And let's end this podcast today and let's get in touch on DMs, right?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Jyoti. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.